The package sat on the welcome mat like an accusation. Brown paper, no return address, my name written in handwriting I did not recognize. I stood in the doorway with my coffee going cold in my hand and looked at it for a long time before I bent to pick it up. 3 days had passed since Caroline's funeral. 3 days since I had chosen to stay home and sand the deck rails instead of sitting in a pew and pretending I belonged there. Inside the paper was a leather journal, dark blue and worn at the corners. I opened it to the first page and saw her handwriting. The real thing, not the careful script she used for grocery lists, but the loose cursive that meant she was writing fast, writing true. The date at the top was from 4 years ago, the day after I moved my things to the house on Porter Street and left her the keys to the life we had built together. I closed it and set it on the kitchen counter. Then I poured my coffee down the sink and stood there with my hands braced on the granite, breathing through my nose like a man trying not to be sick. The morning sun came through the window over the sink and made a bright square on the floor. Dust moved through it in slow spirals. I had always kept a clean house, even after the divorce, even after the silence between us calcified into something that felt permanent and right. Order mattered. Surfaces wiped down, dishes put away, the trash taken out on Tuesday nights without fail. These were the rhythms that replaced conversation. These were what I had instead of her. I did not open the journal that day. I left it on the counter and went to work and came home and made dinner and ate it standing up while I read the news on my phone. Before bed, I moved the journal to the table by the front door, as if I might forget it was there, as if proximity would make the decision for me. But I did not forget. Caroline and I had been married for 32 years. We raised 2 children in a house with a good yard and a mortgage we paid off early. We went to parent-teacher conferences and stood on sidelines and saved for college and retirement. We were competent. We were a team. And then one day, we were not. It happened slowly, the way most endings do. Our daughter Jenna married a man we both thought was too quick with credit cards and too slow with apologies. Our son Paul took a job in Seattle and called less and less until the calls were only on holidays and then only on Christmas. Caroline wanted to talk about it, wanted to schedule visits and send care packages and keep the threads pulled tight. I wanted to let them be adults. I wanted to trust that we had done our job and that the rest was theirs to manage. We stopped agreeing about small things, whether to repaint the kitchen, whether to buy a new car or keep the old one running, whether to go to Jenna's house for Thanksgiving or insist she come to us. The disagreements were not loud. We did not shout. We simply stopped finishing each other's sentences. We simply stopped expecting the other person to understand. The night I told her I was leaving, she was folding laundry in the living room. I stood in the doorway and said I thought we should separate. She looked at me for a long time, a towel in her hands, and then she nodded and went back to folding. That was all. No tears, no anger, no question about why. She knew. We both knew. I found a rental house 3 miles away, a small 2-bedroom with tall windows and old oak floors. I took my books and my tools and half the kitchen supplies. She kept the house and the furniture and the photo albums. We spoke through lawyers for a while, and then we did not speak at all. Jenna called me after the papers were signed and said I had broken her mother's heart. I told her that hearts break for many reasons, and that her mother and I had simply run out of words. Jenna said that was a coward's answer. I did not argue with her. Paul did not call at all. When Caroline got sick, I heard about it from a neighbor. Ovarian cancer, stage 3, already in her lymph nodes. She had declined treatment. I stood in my kitchen and listened to the neighbor explain this through the phone, and I said thank you for telling me, and I hung up. I did not call Caroline. I did not visit. I told myself she had family, she had friends, she had the kids. I told myself I had lost the right to show up and hold her hand. The funeral was on a Tuesday. I woke up that morning and put on a dark suit and stood in front of the mirror. And then I took the suit off and put on jeans and a flannel shirt and went out to the deck with my sander. I worked until my shoulders ached. I worked until I could not think about the service or the music or Jenna standing at a podium trying to summarize her mother in 5 minutes of careful sentences. Afterward, Paul sent a text. She asked about you. I did not reply. On the 4th day, I opened the journal. The first entry was dated September 19th, 4 years ago, the day after I left. "I watched him load the truck this morning," she had written. "He was careful with the boxes, the way he's careful with everything. I stood at the bedroom window and thought about calling down to him, about asking if he wanted coffee for the road, but I didn't. I let him go. I thought that's what he wanted. I thought that's what we both wanted. I sat at the kitchen table and read through the morning and into the afternoon. The entries were not daily. Some weeks had 3 or 4, some months had none. But they were all written to someone, all shaped like letters she had never sent. Most of them were addressed to me. She wrote about the house feeling too big. She wrote about going to the grocery store and buying food for one and feeling like she was play-acting at a new life she did not want. She wrote about Jenna coming over with her husband, about the way they filled the rooms with noise and worry about money and whether they should refinance or move or try for another baby. She wrote about Paul calling from Seattle to say he had been promoted, and how she had been happy for him but also unmoored, because it meant he would never move back, never be close again. "I don't blame him," she wrote. "I don't blame you either. I think we both forgot how to ask for what we needed. I think we both got so good at managing that we forgot we were supposed to be partners, not managers." There were entries about her garden, about planting tomatoes and watching them fail in the heat. Entries about a trip she took to visit her sister in Arizona, about how strange it felt to travel alone. Entries about running into me at the hardware store one Saturday, about how we had nodded at each other like acquaintances and kept walking, and how she had sat in her car afterward and cried. I did not remember seeing her at the hardware store. Or maybe I did, and I had filed it away as something neutral, something that did not require a response. The entries from the year she got sick were different, shorter, more clinical. She wrote about the diagnosis, about the oncologist who had explained the options with a gentleness that made her angry. She wrote about deciding not to treat it, about how that decision had made Jenna furious and Paul go silent on the phone. She wrote about why. "I'm 64, she had written. "I've lived a good life. I raised 2 people who are smart and kind, even if they're angry with me now. I had a marriage that worked until it didn't. I had a garden and a house and friends who check on me. I don't want to spend my last month sick from chemicals, losing my hair, losing my dignity. I want to be here, in my house, with my things until I can't be anymore. I want to decide this one thing for myself." And then, 3 entries from the end. "I still think about him. I still wonder if he's eating well, if he's taking care of himself, if he ever thinks about the night we drove to the coast and slept in the car because we couldn't afford a hotel. We were 23. We had nothing. We had everything." I closed the journal and sat in the silence of my kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street outside. I could hear my own breathing, slow and steady, the breathing of a man who had built his life on control and preparation, and the belief that feelings were problems to be managed, not truths to be honored. I thought about calling Jenna. I thought about driving to Seattle and finding Paul, but I did not know what I would say. I did not know how to explain that I had read her mother's private thoughts and found myself inside them, found myself mourned and remembered, and somehow still loved. Instead, I opened the journal again and read it through from the beginning. This time I paid attention to the dates, to the gaps between entries, to the moments when her handwriting got loose and fast because she was angry or scared or trying to outrun something she could not name. I read it like a man studying a map of a country he thought he knew but had never really seen. There was an entry from 2 Christmases ago. Jenna had hosted and Caroline had gone alone. I had sent a card and a check. Caroline wrote, "Jenna asked where you were. I said you were busy. She said that's always your excuse. I didn't correct her, but the truth is, I don't think you're busy. I think you're lonely. I think we both are. I think we built separate lives because we didn't know how to rebuild the one we had." She was right. I had been lonely. I was still lonely. But loneliness had felt safer than the work of trying again, safer than the risk of failing a second time. In the last weeks of entries, her handwriting grew unsteady. The sentences were shorter, the thoughts less complete. She wrote about pain, about medication, about the hospice nurse who came 3 times a week and spoke in a voice that was kind and terrible in its kindness. She wrote about Jenna sleeping on the couch, about Paul flying in and barely speaking, about how they were both so angry with her for choosing this, for letting go. "I'm not letting go," she wrote. "I'm just done fighting. There's a difference." The final entry was dated the week before she died. If he reads this, I want him to know I don't regret the marriage. I don't regret the life we built, even if it ended the way it did. I regret the silence. I regret not saying, that last year, that I was scared of losing him before I even knew I was sick. I regret not asking him to stay, not because I thought he would, but because I wanted him to know he was still wanted. I think that's all any of us really need, to know we're still wanted, even when we're difficult, even when we've used up all our best words. I set the journal down and looked at my hands. They were the hands of a man who had built decks and fixed leaking faucets, and changed diapers, and signed permission slips, and done all the small, necessary work of being a husband and a father. They were steady hands, competent hands. But they had not reached for her when it mattered. They had not written back. I spent the next 2 days thinking about who had left the journal on my porch. It had not been Jenna. Jenna would have knocked, would have stood in my doorway and demanded I read it while she watched. It had not been Paul. Paul did not know where I kept my spare key, did not know my routines well enough to choose a morning when I would be home. I called the neighbor who had told me about Caroline's illness. She was an older woman, a widow herself, someone who had known us both when we were young and still convinced we could outlast anything. "Did you leave something at my house?" I asked. There was a pause. Then she said, "I thought you should have it." "How did you get it?" "Caroline asked me to hold on to it. She said if anything happened, I should decide whether to give it to you. I decided you needed to see it." "Why?" "Because you loved her," she said. "And because she loved you. And because that doesn't stop mattering just because you stopped talking." I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what to do with what I knew. The truth was, there was nothing to do. Caroline was gone. The journal could not bring her back. It could not undo the years of silence or the decision I had made to stay away when she was dying. It could only sit on my table and remind me that I had been wrong about something fundamental. I had thought our marriage ended because we stopped working. I had thought the distance between us was mutual, a shared decision to let go. But the journal made it clear that she had not let go. She had simply stopped asking me to stay. That was the betrayal, I realized. Not hers, but mine. I had betrayed her by assuming she was fine, by taking her silence as agreement, by believing that competence and independence were the same as not needing anyone. I called Jenna the next morning. She did not answer. I left a message. I said I had something of her mother's, something I thought she should see. I said I was sorry I had not been there. I did not say I was sorry for leaving, because I was not sure that was true. The leaving had been right, or at least necessary. But the way I had left, the completeness of it, the refusal to look back or reach out or wonder if there was another way to love someone after the marriage ended, that was what I regretted. She called back 3 days later. Her voice was tight and formal, the voice she used when she did not want to cry in front of someone. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to give you your mother's journal," I said. "I think she meant for you to have it." "Why do you have it?" "Someone left it on my porch." There was a long silence. Then she said, "Did you read it?" "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." Another silence. Then she said, "I'll come by tomorrow." She arrived at noon. I had cleaned the house and made coffee and set the journal on the table between us like a treaty. She sat across from me and looked at it but did not touch it. "She talked about you," Jenna said. "At the end, she said she wished things had been different. I wish that too. Do you?" Her voice was sharp now, the sharpness of someone who had been holding something in for a long time. "Because it didn't seem like you cared. You didn't visit. You didn't call. You didn't even come to her funeral." "I know." "That's it?" you know? I looked at her. She had Caroline's eyes, the same pale blue that could go hard or soft depending on the light. Right now, they were hard. I was wrong, I said. I thought staying away was the right thing. I thought it was what she wanted. I thought I had lost the right to be there. She asked about you, Jenna said. The week before she died. She asked if you were okay, if you were taking care of yourself, and I told her I didn't know, because you don't talk to me. You don't talk to any of us. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. I know. She reached for the journal then, pulled it across the table and opened it. She read the first page, then the second, then closed it and pressed her palms flat against the cover. She loved you, Jenna said. Even after everything, she loved you. And you just walked away. I thought that's what she wanted. You thought wrong. I did not argue. There was nothing to argue. She was right. I had thought wrong. I had made assumptions based on silence, had built a life based on the belief that distance was the same as peace. Jenna took the journal and left. She did not say goodbye. I watched her car pull away, and then I sat at the table and felt the weight of the empty house around me. Over the next weeks, I thought about what to do with what I had learned. There were no grand gestures to make, no apologies that would undo the past. Caroline was gone. The marriage was over. The life we had built together had ended long before she died. But the journal had changed something. It had made the past more complicated, had turned what I thought was a clean ending into something messier and more true. I called Paul. We had not spoken in over a year. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice wary. "It's me," I said. "I know. I wanted to call. After your mother died, I should have called." There was a pause. Then he said, "Yeah, you should have. I'm sorry." "Okay. I mean it. I know you do." His voice was softer now, less guarded. "But it doesn't change anything. You weren't there. You made a choice. I made the wrong choice. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure there was a right choice." He sighed, and I could hear traffic in the background, the sound of the city he had chosen over the one where he grew up. "She wasn't angry with you. I don't know if Jenna told you that, but at the end she wasn't angry. She was just sad." "I know. Do you?" I read her journal. Someone left it for me. There was a long silence. Then Paul said, "What did it say?" "It said she still loved me. It said she wished things had been different." "They could have been," Paul said. "You could have visited. You could have called. She would have answered." "I know. So why didn't you?" It was the question I had been asking myself for weeks. Why hadn't I called? Why hadn't I visited? Why had I chosen the clean break over the messy work of staying connected to someone I no longer lived with but had never stopped caring about? "I was afraid," I said finally. "I was afraid I would make it worse. I was afraid I would say the wrong thing, or that she would tell me to leave, or that it would hurt more to be close to her and not be with her than it did to just stay away." "That's stupid," Paul said. "I know. You should have been there." "I know." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I'm angry with you. I'm angry that you weren't there. But I'm also tired of being angry. I don't want to spend the rest of my life not talking to you because you made a mistake." "I don't want that either." "Then don't disappear again. If you're going to be my father, then be my father. Not just on Christmas. Not just when it's easy." "Okay. I mean it." "So do I." We talked for a few more minutes about his job and his apartment and a woman he had started seeing. It was not a long conversation, and it did not fix everything, but it was a start. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and felt something loosen in my chest, some tightness I had been carrying without knowing it. Jenna called a week later. She asked if I wanted to come to dinner. I said yes. The dinner was awkward. Jenna's husband was polite but distant, the way people are when they know there is history they were not part of and do not want to wade into. Jenna was careful, serving food and asking neutral questions about my work and my house. But at the end of the night, when I was putting on my coat, she handed me a small box. "I found this in Mom's things," she said. "I think she wanted you to have it." Inside the box was a photograph. Caroline and me on our wedding day, standing in front of a courthouse in a town neither of us lived in anymore. We were young and slightly underdressed, my tie crooked, her dress borrowed from a friend. We were smiling. We looked happy. I thanked Jenna and drove home with the photograph on the seat beside me. When I got back to my house, I set it on the mantel, next to a picture of the kids when they were small. It was not a shrine. It was just a fact. This had happened. This had been real. And even though it ended, even though I had made mistakes I could not take back, it still mattered. I kept the journal. I did not read it again, but I kept it on the shelf in my study, next to the books I had carried from the old house. Sometimes I would see it and think about Caroline's handwriting, about the way she had written to me even when I was not there to read it. I thought about how we spend so much of our lives trying to manage outcomes, trying to control the mess of being human, and how sometimes the most important things happen in the silence, in the letters we write but never send, in the love we carry even when we are alone. The betrayal had not been dramatic. There had been no affair, no theft, no public humiliation. The betrayal had been quieter than that. It had been the slow erosion of attention, the assumption that we could stop trying because we had already succeeded. It had been my belief that leaving was the same as letting go, that distance was the same as peace. And it had been the years I spent convincing myself that I was fine, that we were both fine, that the end of the marriage was simply the end, and not a door left open that neither of us had the courage to walk through. Now, in the aftermath, I live differently. I call Paul once a week. I go to Jenna's house for dinner once a month. I do not pretend that this fixes what I broke, but I do it anyway, because I learned that trying is not the same as succeeding, and that showing up is not the same as being perfect. I learned that love does not always look like I thought it would, that sometimes it looks like a phone call on a Sunday morning, or a photograph on a mantel, or a journal full of words that were never spoken but were always true. Caroline is gone. I cannot apologize to her. I cannot ask her forgiveness or explain why I stayed away, but I can honor what she wrote. I can choose now to be the person she seemed to believe I could be. Not the man who left and never looked back, but the man who left and learned that leaving is not the same as being gone forever. Some nights I sit on my deck and think about the morning I found the journal on my porch. I think about how close I came to throwing it away, to leaving it unopened and unread. I think about how much we miss when we decide in advance what we are capable of feeling, what we are capable of surviving. I think about how Caroline must have known that I would need permission to come back, even if only in my own mind, and how she gave it to me in the only way she could. The journal sits on my shelf, the photograph sits on my mantel, and I sit here, in a house that is too big and too quiet, and I think about what it means to be forgiven by someone who is no longer here to say the words. I think it means you forgive yourself. I think it means you stop running from the parts of your story that hurt to remember. I think it means you keep going, not because you have earned it, but because staying stuck in regret is just another way of refusing to live. I am 67 years old. I have made mistakes that I cannot undo. I have hurt people I loved, but I am still here. And as long as I am here, I have the choice to do better, to be better, to honor the woman who wrote those letters and the life we built together, even if we could not sustain it. That is not redemption. That is not closure. But it is something. And sometimes something is enough.